Hi, I'm Brandon. Welcome to my channel, Books in the Shire. As the title implies, I'm going to be talking about all the series that I'm currently in the middle of. It is a lot. I'm pretty sure there's over 30. I have a huge stack over here of all the books I'm going to be talking about. Basically, I'm just going to be talking about like where I'm at in the series, how I'm feeling about it. Yeah, nothing too crazy, probably not going to go into synopses because that would be too long, but I want this to kind of hold me accountable to try to read series because I will just read the first book and then move on. The first series that I'm currently reading is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I've read the first 3 out of 7 books in this series. I remember really disliking The Horse and His Boy, and I think a lot of people have that feeling. That was kind of like, that's the book I left off on, so that's why I didn't keep going, I'm pretty sure, but I do actually want to try and reread all of them and finish out the series just to know how I feel about it. Next I have Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Technically I'm caught up with this series. The second book hasn't been released yet, but I am in the middle of the series. I really enjoyed this. I read it earlier this year. It's a fun middle grade with like a complex like character storyline, which I really enjoy, so yeah, currently reading this. Next I have A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I read the first 2 books in this series and I could not tell you why I haven't kept going. Like, I just have one more book, but every time I've picked it up, I read 50 pages and then haven't kept going. I don't know why. I want to know how the series ends. Like, this book, A Dark Shade of Magic, is literally one of my favorite books, so I'm like, why am I not getting around to finishing the series? I think I'm a little nervous about how it's gonna end, but I need to finish it. That's like a priority this year. Like, I should try and finish it. Next I have Legenborn by Tracy Deonn. I'm technically caught up with this series because the second book hasn't been released, but I think it comes out this year. I enjoyed this. I definitely had some issues with it, but I am very intrigued to see where the story goes, because I think there was a great buildup and great cliffhanger at the end of this book, so I do really want to keep going, but I am a little hesitant just because this wasn't my favorite. I gave it 3 stars, so it's not a bad book by any means, but you know, just a little cautious. Next I have Blade of Secrets by Tricia Levenseller. I'm caught up with this series. The second and final book comes out, I believe, in June. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know how Tricia Levenseller is able to do it, but she packs so much story into such a short amount of time, but you don't feel like you're missing anything. So really enjoyed this, really excited to see where the second book goes. Next I have The Ravens by Kass and Danielle Paige. I have read the first book, haven't read the second. I am a bit hesitant to read the second book, just because when I read this book, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. After reflecting on the book, I just don't know if I'm intrigued. Like, not that it's a bad book or anything, I just like don't know if I want to keep going with the series. So this is definitely like a up in the air series. I may keep going with it. Next I have Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I've only read the first book in this trilogy. I enjoyed this book, but I also had a lot of issues with it. I think I gave it 3 stars. I think it's just way too long. It's over 500 pages, and honestly, it did not need to be. It could have been 400 easily, I think. That was like one of my issues, but I really liked the ending of the book, and it made me want to keep going. I mean, I bought the other 2, they're right there. I do want to keep going with this series. It's just I haven't done that. If I'm not enjoying the second book though, I think I might just not keep going with the series and just unhaul them because I think they're fine reads, but I don't think they're my favorite. Another series by Marissa Meyer is Cinder, Lunar Chronicles series by Marissa Meyer. I've read the first 2 books in this series and I'm really enjoying it. I just started in December, I believe, and I flew through Cinder, I flew through Scarlet. I was just really intrigued by the stories. I for sure want to keep going. I'm really excited to read the 3rd one. I think this is just such a good like sci-fi retelling. I think a lot of the times fairy tales try too hard to make it like different and not fall into the same category or tropes and stuff that the original did, but I don't see why that's an issue. Like, feed into them. But I feel like this actually isn't trying hard to be different. It just itself is different. I really like the world Marissa Meyer has created and like the conflicts and all of that, so definitely really excited to keep going with this series. Next I have Legend by Marie Lu. I've only read the first book in this series. I read it earlier this year and really enjoyed it. There were definitely moments where I like wasn't vibing with it, but I think as a whole I still really enjoyed the book and like the story that it was telling. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I am a little worried that it's going to just be kind of another YA dystopian series, but I don't mind that. I like dystopian and I like stereotypical dystopian, I guess, so I am excited about it. Next I have The Infinity Course by Akemi Bowman. I think this is a duology. I've only read this book. I think the second one comes out later this year. But I remember really enjoying this one. I read it last year on audio, and honestly, I don't remember much, which is shitty. Like, I think I just read it too quickly to be able to fully absorb the story, but it was such an interesting concept, and I remember reading it quickly because I was enjoying it. But I definitely think I need to reread this one before I keep going with this series. Next, I have Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. This is a adult romance series. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. Like, I was living for it. It was just such a good romance. And then the second book, I think, comes out in the summer of this year. I'm really excited about it. So I'm all caught up technically with the series. I'm just so excited. I loved this book, and I really hope the second one is just as good, if not better, because this was just so well crafted. I know it's just like a romance, but I had such a great time, and like I didn't want to put it down, so I'm so excited. That's all I can say, is that I'm really excited. The next series has probably been on my TBR for the longest amount of time, and that is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. I read Inkheart maybe when I was in middle school, so like at least 10 years ago, and I loved it. But when I read it originally, I didn't know that it was a series, so I never kept going, because honestly this book wraps up really nicely. Like, you wouldn't know it's a series if you were just reading it, because it wraps up very nicely. It feels like a standalone. It's a chonker too, so like I think there's enough story in there to be able to be like, yeah, I got enough story. It's a standalone basically. This is one of my favorite books. 5 stars. Like, I loved it, and I just still haven't read them. I think I'm scared to read them because 1, they are massive like this book, but 2, I feel like this one is just so good that if I read another one, I'm not gonna like it as much. I don't know. This is just me like psyching myself out of it, but I really enjoyed this book. I really need to keep going with this series. I'm just nervous. Next is a graphic novel series, which technically isn't a series but kind of is at the same time, and that's the Avatar comics. I've read the first, I think, 4 of them, because technically they're their own stories and they're separate, but they're all set in the world of Avatar. So, and it follows like the characters from Avatar: The Last Airbender, so technically like they're standalones but also together. So I'm gonna count them together though. I read, I think, like I said, the first 3 or 4 issues in the graphic novel series, and I think there's like 15, so got a long ways to go, but I'm slowly making my way through them. I try not to like go through them too fast because I do really love them and I love the world, so taking my sweet time. But yeah, I love Avatar, one of my favorite shows, so I'm reading the books. Next, I have The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've only read the first book in this series. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I think it's like a fine mystery. It's a fun story. For me, what made it interesting was the plot and the mystery behind it all, but the characters honestly really annoy me. I just like don't care for them, and that has nothing to do with like the author being a bad writer or anything. I think the characters are, oh my god, I can't speak. I think the characters are meant to be annoying because they're high schoolers. Like, she writes them like high schoolers, which good because they're high schoolers. So it's like they're just annoying because they're high schoolers, and that's just something hard for me to get through with this series, but I still really enjoyed it and want to know how the mystery wraps up, because it did end on, I guess you would say, a cliffhanger. It left off with, you know, some unknown stuff and more layers to the mystery, which makes it even more interesting for me. The next book, I genuinely don't know if I'm going to keep going with this series because I love and hate it. I've talked about it a few times on this channel, but I'm going to talk about it again. And that's Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I hated this book, but at the same time had such a great time reading it. I think it was just like, in my mind, if you love it, I'm sorry, but this is just my personal opinion. I thought it was really trashy. Like, you know, nothing really made sense. Stuff was just added in for the sake of like, oh, that's a fantasy element, let's throw it in. And so I liked that element of it. I liked how kind of odd it was with all of these things together and the story just being there. Like, everything was just too convenient. I liked that part, but I hated everything about those same things because I was like, this story is just so, I don't know, it exists. It was a weird time for me, but I genuinely think I'm going to keep going just for the sake of enjoyment for myself, and I'm not going to read it critically. I'm just going to be like, I'm here for a fun time, you know? Next, I have Nocturna by motayne. This is the first book in, I think, a trilogy. I've only read the first one. And this is like a Spanish-inspired story, I'm pretty sure. Or Latin American inspired, I believe. And it was so interesting. I think for me, the one thing that I disliked about it was just how long it was. And the ending was a little too neatly wrapped up for me. So we'll see how it goes. But I did really like the characters. I loved the world. I liked the magic system. So I have really high hopes to see where the series goes. Next, I have The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chachki. I just read this book like a month ago at most, and I really enjoyed it. I've only read the first book, haven't read the other two, but it was just a really nice like fantasy series. It was a good heist story. I really enjoyed it. I liked the characters a lot, so excited to keep going with it. Next, I have The Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I've only read the first book in the series, but I really enjoyed it. I liked the romance elements. I liked the darkness of it. It's not like super dark, but it is dark at the same time. I've never really read like a series that's literally just fantasy romance. I always read fantasy with romance in it, but I would definitely classify this as a fantasy romance. So it's definitely interesting. I did enjoy it. I've heard the second book's really steamy. I'm excited for that. Next is The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. I've only read the first book. I really enjoyed it. There were definitely elements of it that weren't my fave, but the way it ended, I was like, I need to pick up the second book right away. I still haven't picked it up, but I want to. I have it on my shelf. I'm ready to go. I just need to read it, but the ending is really what sold me for this book, because I was like enjoying it in the beginning and then it was a little slow in the middle, but then the end I was like, I'm here for it. Let's keep going. Where's this gonna go? Next, I have The Bones of Ruin by Sarah Raleigh. I'm up to date on this series because only the first book's out so far. It's like a historical fantasy. It was fun. It was dark, but I feel like it was a little too long. I guess I have issues with long stories. I don't know. But I still am very intrigued to see where it goes. I feel like there was a lot of setup in this, which was really interesting. And now the next books can, you know, follow through at that setup. We can figure out what's actually going to go down. So I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. Next, I have A Spindle Splinter by Alex E. Harrow. This is the first in a novella fairy tale retelling series. But this was enjoyable. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. But it wasn't my favorite, so I'm kind of like hesitant to keep going with the series, but I do want to pick up the second and see how I feel about it. And if I'm not feeling the second, I probably won't keep going with the series, but we'll see once we get there. Next, I have An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. I've only read the first book. I'm currently reading the second book, and I have been for like months. I think I'm 150 or so pages in, and I'm enjoying it. I just like haven't kept going for some reason. But I gave this first book, I think like 3 stars, but I think I was just really harsh for no reason. And the second book, like the amount that I've read, I'm like, I'm really enjoying this. I like the characters. I like the story. So I don't know why I rated this one a 3, but definitely might have to reread it to keep going with the series because I don't totally remember everything, but I am enjoying it. I really like the characters and the world that this is set in, so I don't know why I haven't kept going. Next, I have The Last Magician series by Lisa Maxwell. I'm all caught up on this series. I think the 4th book comes out in May, sometime this year, but this series, I loved the first book. I gave it 5 stars, and then the second and third book weren't my favorite. I think the story just took a different turn than I was expecting, and the books are really long, and again, a running theme, I don't think they needed to be as long as they were, especially the second and third ones. Like this one, I think the length is okay. It's not too bad. I think it's like 400, 500 pages. So like it's not too bad, but the other two are above 600 and it just felt like it was too much. But I do really enjoy it. I love the characters and I like the whole magic system that the author has created, but it's just the plot lines are getting a little tedious and repetitive for me, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about the 4th, but I am excited for its release. Next, I have the Uncanny X-Men series. I've read the first 2 volumes in this, and I think there's 12 volumes. 12 or like 15, something like that, but I love the X-Men. They are like near and dear to my heart. And I never had read the like original stuff. This isn't the original, this is the reboot team. But I had never read the older comics. I've only read recent ones, probably within the past 20 years, but I don't remember them that well. But I just love this because this team is one of my favorites. Like Colossus is one of my favorite superheroes, and he's like a main guy. Love Storm, she's an icon. Wolverine's okay, he's there, and so is Scott, but that's okay. But I really love the team. I like the banter with the team, and I like the storylines. And this is also when they get into the Dark Phoenix arc, so I'm intrigued to see how it plays out in the comics, so that I've only ever seen the bad film adaptations of it, so we're gonna see how that goes. Next I have Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan. I've only read the first 3 books in this series. I know, everyone's read them, everyone loves it. I think it's a great series. It's definitely not my favorite series, I think, because I didn't read it until I was an adult, probably like 20 or so, so it doesn't connect with me as much as it did if I was a kid reading it, you know, but I can understand why everyone loves it. I really loved, what's the second one? Sea of Monsters, that's the second one. I loved that one because I'd only ever seen the film, trash film, but the second book was just so good, and I don't know why. Like, that's my favorite out of the 3 I've read so far. It just, like, it hit different. So I gotta keep going, gotta see how it ends, because I do want to read all of the, like, Rick Riordan books, plus all the, like, Rick Riordan Presents. I'm just really slow, and I haven't gotten there yet. Next is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I've read the first 2 volumes in this graphic novel series, and I love them. They're so cute. Like, at first I thought everyone was hyping this series up. I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's great, but, like, how good can it be? I don't know, I guess I was like psyching myself out. But after reading the first 2, I really enjoyed them. They're so cute, they're so wholesome, and they discuss topics, like important topics like coming out, understanding your sexuality and stuff, and I think that's really important. Next is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. I had never read these when they were webtoons comics. I just picked it up when it came out, the printed edition, and it was definitely fun. I really love the color choices. It wasn't my favorite. I think it's definitely a fun, quick graphic novel, but nothing that stands out to me. Next I have Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This is a series I'm currently reading and getting through. I just finished the first 2 books recently and enjoyed them a lot. I loved Red Queen. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was really good, and I had all of these ideas of where I wanted the story to go, but then I read the second one and it didn't go down that route, and I was like, oh, that's disappointing. I still want to read the books. I still want to, you know, find out how the story ends, but after reading the second one, I am a little hesitant to keep going just because it wasn't the way I wanted it to be. Next, I have the Brooklyn Bruja series by Zoraida Cordova. This is the first book in that series. I've read the first 2, I still have to read the third. When I read Labyrinth Lost, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and then I recently read the second one and I gave it 3, just because the books read a little young for me. They read more like for 14, 15-year-olds maybe, and I'm not in that age range anymore, so that is something I had to get used to when reading them, but when I was able to kind of adjust, I was enjoying the series and the story. Next, I have Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I've read the first 2 books in this series. I really enjoyed them. Similar to Heartstopper, I like never understood, I never read a book by Sarah J. Maas before I read Throne of Glass, but I was like, why is she so hyped? Like, what is the whole thing about her? And so I was like, I will read it because the synopsis sounds intriguing to me, but I was very hesitant. But I really enjoyed it. Like, yes, it's a kind of typical YA fantasy, but I thought it was really well done. Last but not least, I have The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. I've read the first 3 books in this series. I do want to finish it, but I've been very, like, hesitant to, because I don't know, I go through these phases, which I'm sure a lot of people do, where I'm like, yeah, I love The Mortal Instruments, great books, and then I go through another phase where I'm like, trash, I hate it, why did I read this, why did I enjoy it? So I'm currently in that phase where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to keep going with the series, but probably in a few months that'll change. I read the first book like right before the movie came out, and I was obsessed, and I think there's just a lot of nostalgia connected to this series for me, and that's kind of why I like it more than maybe someone who's reading it now who doesn't have that nostalgia. I do want to see where it goes, and I do want to read all the other Shadowhunter books. I know technically I don't need to finish this series to read those, but I'm a completionist, so I'm like, no, I need to finish Mortal Instruments before I can keep going with the others. I'm currently reading the Countess of Harley series. This is a cozy mystery series. I've read the first book. I'm currently reading the second book. I'm really enjoying it. They're fun, like, period romance mystery stories. I think it's set in like the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s in England. Really enjoying it, having a fun time. It's a really, really slow burn romance, and I'm vibing with that. I think those are all the series I'm reading. I might have missed some. I tried to write it all down and remember, but I genuinely don't remember. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a fun time kind of like seeing how many series I actually need to read. I had 3 giant stacks, and I was like, oh shit, I should probably get on that sometime soon, because I think I have more than 30 series I'm in the middle of technically, but that's fun. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.